Hey everybody, welcome to Retro Game Night. Back again. I am host Damian DiCarlo, and we are a podcast all about retro gaming, and sometimes we sneak in a little bit of information of the new stuff too. I have a couple of different co-hosts with me today. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves to everybody?
Yeah, hey guys, how's it going? My name is Earl. Hope you guys doing well. Glad that you're signed on to this podcast, and I'll pass it over to my brother.
Hey Damian, thank you for inviting me on the show. My name is Manny. Earl's brother, huge geek culture enthusiast. So happy to be
Weird.
here.
I can't tell in the background at all that's what you're into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys are brothers, and I actually did know that, but what's your guys' difference in age?
Really, 1 year.
15
1 year.
months. 15
Wow.
months to be exact. Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect for growing up. That means also you guys got into a lot of fights.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Trying to share a gaming console at that age when, he wants to play all the time or I wanted to play all the time got a little sticky at the house, but, we made it work out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, just to give our subscribers a little review, they haven't seen me in a while. Our show went on a long hiatus through different decisions. And you'll notice the other two are not with me anymore, and this is a creative turn that I decided to do to now basically go in this direction, and we're back to reviewing some games, and I think it would be appropriate to start this one off kind of like the way I started my very first episode of Retro Game Night, to kind of discuss our overall memories and our experiences with retro gaming, what we had as favorites, which ones we hated, which ones were the hardest ones we played. So I'll kind of start off with you, Earl. You kind of already started mentioning how you and your brother sharing a console was pretty difficult. What was that like? What game did you guys play? And tell me some of your memories.
There's gotta be so many, but growing up too, it was that like every Christmas or come around and what would we ask? Santa. And again, sorry, background is Christmas, so it just made me gravitate to that time.
You just apologized for Christmas.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Christmas back here.
What I'm saying is, that's how I my first intuition or what my memory is, in asking Santa, what can we get? It's like, what's the latest gaming console? So at that point, it was like, okay, we're gonna get a Super Nintendo, and we're gonna try to share it or do whatever. But I think one of the games, and just talk about a classic game, is Donkey Kong. I think there was a lot of times when we both were playing Donkey Kong and we were both trying to finish it, because at some point we could never, unless I didn't really like the game, we both kind of wanted to play it. So it was like, okay, you take the turn, you'll do this stage, I'll do the next stage.
So yeah.
So I remember
it was Donkey Kong Country.
Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah. On Super Nintendo by Rare.
And there was one particular stage I couldn't beat, and that was when you're Diddy Kong Jr., the little guy, and there was the barrels that were running down, and for some reason
I remember this.
Couldn't pass that one stage.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm like, Manny, I'm like, hey, can you beat this for me? And he's like, sure. And of course, first try it, and he does it. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, then I get the next stage, right? So I mean, there's a lot of shared memories like that where I don't think that I ever finished a full video game like on my own. For the most part, I was like, hey Manny, can you kind of help me with this one or whatever the case was? But yeah, like that's one. And then another one is obviously the fighting games. We always got into it with Mortal Kombat, Tekken.
Oh, the good old
Tekken.
days.
I couldn't, like I was always using martial law. That's like the Bruce Lee guy, and he could do all these combos.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was the Bruce Lee guy.
Yeah, he was the Bruce Lee guy. And so that was the guy that I kind of like gravitated towards. Okay, cool. Let me use this character.
Or it was
Eddie Gordo. Eddie Gordo.
Yeah, when Tekken 3 came out.
Yeah,
those were, dude. That's when the graphics have really improved. And I think that took place. The Tekken 3 was, I think, PlayStation 1. Maybe no, yeah,
It was PS1 from my memory.
Yeah, and then we played it until PlayStation 2. Where it was Tekken 4 and then 5. And
I remember the first one for PS2 was Tekken Tag, to my knowledge.
Yes. Tekken Tag was also revolutionary. Like, yeah, that was a great version.
I think it was they said always these games were upgraded to. I mean, I'm going to age myself obviously in the show already, but when we used to go to arcades, that was top of the line. That was like, I wish I had games like this at home, and it was usually NES or it was
Yeah.
Turbo at the time, and then it graduated to Genesis, and it was like like this, and it was like, oh, this is more like the arcade stuff, cool. And then when you got to, I think it was PS2 finally, I felt, okay, this is a lot like the arcade stuff at home now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree that at that point, that's when things have improved.
Yeah, back in those early days too, we'll date ourselves. So when we got dropped off at the mall, we weren't there to shop. We were there to go to the arcade, and you would have to, put the quarter to know that you're next against the other opponent, right? So there was like a line always with a certain video games. Tekken was one.
Street Fighter,
Street
all of
Fighter.
them, almost.
Was Golden Axe one too? That was that we
That was,
played a lot, or
yeah.
something like The Simpsons. You remember like all those
Oh,
other
yeah.
games that there was like a four
TMNT.
player. Oh, yeah.
TMNT was one where we I remember one Vegas trip because our dad always went to Vegas. We'd always be at the arcades, but one time Earl and I were just we were bound to beat TMNT in time. And dude, we wasted so many quarters, but ended up finishing that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one's another classic. So I do have a arcade one machine, and one machine that I really want to get is the TMNT one. That that would be awesome.
Who'd you always play though? I always picked Donatello, I think, and then you always either were Leo or
Leo or Raph.
Raph. Yeah,
was the favorites.
Yeah.
It was no, but actually I tried buying that arcade machine on from Arcade One Up, but it ended up being I think it just ended up being sold out because they discontinued it.
They sold out the Turtles one up. I remember wanting the same one, and it sold out pretty quickly. I would say a matter of months, honestly. I think it was like what, $3.99 for that one, or $4.99?
Yeah, something to that effect. And then the only way you can get one was on eBay for like double, 800, 1,200.
Yeah.
And then I think that's pretty much the only way that you can acquire one is something like eBay for an obscene amount of money.
Right. And I think it's one of the few or one of the only ones. No, I think there's that one and X-Men that have the 4-player setup.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the one that you have, like the Street Fighter, I believe is just 2, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. The X-Men as well as the TMNT. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it Turtles in Time? I don't think it was Turtles in Time. Thinking about
both.
Now.
It was both Turtles games. It was the arcade 91 version and the Turtles in Time collection. It was both of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
But yeah, going back to the memories of it, I'm gonna give props to Arcade One Up. I really love that they released those, even though technically you can get them on a ROM or another way. But I really appreciated they went through the trouble of making a miniature version of the cabinet, something more movable, something more practical instead of having the big fat thing. So props to them, and I hope they keep doing. I know they had like a Star Wars one that came out, and a really cool retro arcade versions of those, which are really neat.
Do you have one yourself?
I don't, and I think I may look into that now that I'm actually moving, and I may have more room for that. I was wanting to get the Turtles one, if not maybe the Marvel Superheroes one. I was really wanting, and I might jump in and get that.
Yeah, so I don't expect it to last a long time. I mean, the material isn't all too strong,
right?
So don't have any high expectations. Although it's lasted for some time. I've had it for 2 years now, but it just doesn't seem that it'll last a long time.
Right.
At least for a couple of years come.
I would say for the price, it's pretty fair. I know that I did venture to make my own cabinet before, and using that material is not just costly, but it is very, very freaking heavy and thick. And so when you do that, I would assume the cost would go up the roof, trying to resell a cabinet. I mean, even with the same amount of material, even if it was miniaturized, would still probably be really costly.
So
And
were you said that you were going to build your own cabinet? I think that
I
was
I
awesome.
I did I
Like,
did build one. So what
so like
happened was
Raspberry
did.
Pi.
I did a
Okay,
Okay.
Raspberry Pi
there you go.
cabinet, and I ended up modeling after an MK2 cabinet design, and so I did it that way, and then just set it up, and it was actually a really great project. And ever since then, I never really ended up buying one of these, but the problem is I made it um, to scale of a real one, so it's extremely big, and I think I may end up selling it and maybe doing one of these miniature ones.
That's cool.
Yeah, I've went as far as creating the retro pie, but not a whole cabinet. So kudos to you. I've looked into that project and I was like, I
It
don't
was
have
a
the
lot
time
of
or the
trouble,
skill to do this.
it was a lot of fun though, and
Yeah.
I was able to do that project alone after having a lot of time not too long ago, and so that was great. But Manny, what are some of your memories on your games? Like, tell me some of your favorites now that
Um,
we are on the arcade. But what about at home on your console?
yeah, so Earl and I had video games starting from Nintendo, the NES onward, right? I think the last console that he and I collectively owned was probably a PlayStation. And then after that, I got more consoles than he did. But one of my most favorite ones was the PS1. Now, with the PS1 that we had, yeah, it was an earlier model that could
Right.
play some of the Japanese imported games with a simple trick,
Yeah,
right?
Clay. There's a little button on the back, right?
Oh, I remember
Clay.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got we there's a video game store in the valley called, I think it's Game Dude.
Game dude.
Uh
Yeah.
Game Dude, yeah, and that's in the San Fernando of
Yeah.
yeah,
here in
Game dude.
California. Yeah.
yeah. And so they had a ton of video games, right? And if you had a PlayStation 1 with an earlier serial number and that could play imported Japanese imported games, like they had those games. They had, dude, at the time I was like, "Oh my god, I can play Dragon Ball Z on this."
Right. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, we were sold. And then there were, I mean, but in that platform alone, you had Resident Evil, you had Crash
Mhm.
Bandicoot, 2 that I really loved. Uh, everyone played Final Fantasy 7,
Of
right?
course. Who in the world did not play Final Fantasy
Yeah,
VII?
yeah,
That's our age.
yeah, yeah. But one of the
Yeah.
earlier games, though, to that that I totally almost forgot was Battle Arena Toshinden.
Oh my
I
goodness,
thought,
that game.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, that was
I was
so
like,
much
wait, a
fun.
fighting game with weapons?
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm
Yeah.
in.
And
Um,
this was the time where we were able to then now bring something new with the PS1. It was not just CD, at home, but besides, we had CD-ROM, but like this was your first CD console that I believe that was this big
Mhm.
in the US and North America, and we had now cutscenes. They didn't do that before, and we had better
Yeah.
music quality because it was CD instead of chiptune. And then a Polygon, which now we look at and is pretty archaic, but at the time it was really cool to see
it
3D
was
happen.
revolutionary.
Yeah, and
Revolutionary.
you could save mid game, right? So you don't have to finish the game at that sitting, or you could actually, like a long game like Final Fantasy VII, you don't, those games were long enough where you couldn't have that type of, full length game without that memory card. And I think that kind of also added to that extra mystique of the whole PlayStation when it first came out. Again, that was a great console. And, talking about the older consoles, the retro consoles, the funniest thing about it is, right, we had to plug in the remote control. So let's say you're plugged in and then you have like a family member or my brother walking by and I'm playing, kicks the cord, and then all of a sudden, like you can't control your character. But, that was just, I don't know, one of the
Yeah.
funny things about those consoles. And now they're all wireless.
Yeah, they're all wireless now, but back in the day, yeah, and I remember the cords were I always wanted them to be longer because
Right.
back in the day,
Yeah.
you had those gigantic TVs, and I mean, unless they were placed in a certain way where you could sit at a distance, and I don't know, it was difficult to sit in front of them. I remember because it was unless you literally just pop squat and just sat literally right in front of it on the floor, then you couldn't really go that far away from the TV because the cord was never long enough. And I do remember those days before the wireless, and so even I think it went all the way up until PS3, I think, was the first actual wireless one to my knowledge. I know PS2 was corded.
PS2.
Then they were able to do cordless eventually
Yeah.
with other third-party companies. Um, but yeah, all corded up until then.
Yeah. And I remember just, hearing my mom scream, not scream, but hey, back away from the TV, you're too close. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, the control only goes so far.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so with these games, this is something I touched on before with my former co-host, and there was a lot of games that we would review, we would play. Um, a lot of them were known for their immensely hard gameplay. Is there any games that you guys can remember off the top of your head that were just so unbelievably hard to play that you just to this
Oh,
day, yeah, you have
dude,
nightmares?
so PlayStation had a game. I think it was Perfect Dark. Or
I
is
think you're
it?
thinking of Nintendo 64 with Perfect Dark. That was the
Oh,
one that
okay.
was a lot like GoldenEye.
No, it was really choppy. It was Dark something. Oh, I gotta look it up.
Okay.
But yeah, that was one of the worst 2D. No, it was 3D. No, it was 2D scrolling, but it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
What about you, Earl? Do you remember a game that was really hard?
You know what? As weird as this may sound, it was probably actually Golden Eye, but obviously not the multiplayer, but trying to beat all the stages and then
Right.
get everything because they added those extra features at the end where you can unlock like a golden gun or something like that. So I remember doing a stage and it was, I don't know if it was Silo or something, but you had to beat this one particular uh, round or this game in a certain time frame to unlock, let's say, the golden gun.
Right.
And it just took me forever. And I was so frustrated to a point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna give up on GoldenEye. Although it was the coolest game at the time, I was just like, okay, this is not going to where it is. But yeah, I mean, there's others, but again, it's it just took time, I think. But with beating something that you feel like you could do, and it was that game, was one that kind of just got me a little bit more frustrated than most. Yeah.
I got one. I got another one that I buried deep down in my head was like unplayable. I was excited to have this game. Okay, don't get me wrong. I was super excited to have this game, but it was the worst game to play. It was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh boy, one of my favorites. Yeah, it was really hard.
Yes.
That is known as one of the hardest games. Between that, Battletoads and Contra are known as some of the hardest games ever made. And Turtles was no exception. That was, man, that was tough. But I did beat it. We did review it on Retro Game Night. I would venture to do it again with you guys or review it somehow again on the show. But it just was actually a lot of fun once you got some cheats in because you appreciated a lot of the points that were the high points in the games that we would never see because we could never get to it.
Did you always try to find a cheat? Like whatever game you had, if they remember they sold those books too that were kind of like the
I
cliff
do
notes
remember that.
for
Yeah.
your game, and you'd be like, okay, it's $9.99, Mom. We gotta also get this Cliff Notes book because it's gonna tell me how to beat it. But were you always one to look for a cheat in a game?
It took me a little bit to then get to that point. I always wanted the challenge without it. Even as a kid, I always thought I don't go there yet. Hang on, keep going until I got to a point, and I was pretty disciplined enough to hold my rage back as much as I could to then go into a cheat.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I just knew that if I kept trying, sometimes I would use a cheat when I remember there were some of my friends. I don't know if you were like this in school, but like I remember we would talk about it, and I would feel sheepish and kind of like stupid if I talked about a certain part I was stuck at, and they're like, "Oh, all you gotta do is just do that."
Yeah.
Or just all you gotta do is just jump on the platform and shoot it
Just
from
jump
there. And I
over.
would
Yeah,
do
just
it.
jump. It's always jump on a platform, and
And
then
I,
that's where you finish.
and,
Yeah.
and I'd feel so stupid. Even as a kid, I kind of felt like this is kind of humiliating. And I would go try it, and yeah, I would beat it after several more times. And then I thought maybe I can just get through it without the cheats and see if I can show my friends that I can do it without it.
Yeah.
So it
I
took
think
me a while until I got to that point.
I think
So I
one
think I'm
game.
completely opposite there because, and I totally respect that. You you withheld yourself from going into cheating. I automatically just wanted to exploit a game. I just wanted to see what I could do outside of what it was programmed to do. I just wondered how much can you do? What kind of damage can you do, for example? Outside of what it was intended for.
Right.
In Game Genie, that was a fun trick to have up your sleeve.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it only went so far. Now I will say, however, I got this moment of like, okay, this is lame. I think it was when I was playing GTA San Andreas God mode, and I was like, oh yeah, this is boring now. Like,
Right. It took away the fun, right?
yeah.
Yeah. After a while, then you start feeling like the developer. I'm like, oh, I see all these flaws and like all these things in front of me. This is boring. Like, just
Yeah.
going from one side of the screen to the other.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of what makes the magic of retro gaming is, to a certain extent, that impossibility was kind of thrilling in a weird psychological way. It made our minds think this is worth trying again and again and again on.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, that's the definition of stupidity. I mean, it's like, the same result's going to happen, but you keep doing it anyway.
Yeah.
But I know that these games now, and this was my biggest complaint on Retro Game Night on my podcast, we've always talked about this. Like, video games now, while they're not bad by any means, I have, of course, many favorites that were, modern, but games are so linear, and there's typical campaigns and story modes that we're familiar with. But I kind of always feel like video games today, and you guys tell me if you agree or not, I think that they kind of hold your hand through the whole process a little too easy.
Now, yeah. Even
I kind of feel that it just always walks me by the hand where to go, and that's not a bad thing, but it's kind of like what you were saying, Manny. Like, you're in God mode, and to a certain extent, it's like, I know I'm gonna beat it. It's just a matter of probably dying a few times, and I'll get there, or I'll look it up on the internet where to go. But where the games back then were amazing is that you had to either get a magazine to find a trick, or you'd have to ask your friend at school or someone that would play the game to tell you how to do it. Otherwise, there'd be no way else to do it.
Yeah, or you're sitting there for hours in front of the TV trying to get through that one stage.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying again and again, and it turned into a mission just to get through one stage, one level. Whereas now, kids, that I've talked to, and adults, everyone, these games are just turn and burn. They play them, and they don't even remember them. They're like, yeah, I played Call of Duty Black Ops. Can't even tell you what it was about, because there's just so many to keep going with. But a game like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for NES, that is ingrained in our brain. I remember that game very well because I spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
I think one game that really sticks out growing up as, a kid and watching Manny play was Resident Evil, because it was a one-person game, right? So
Right.
it was one of those things like, hey, we have to share it. But for some reason, I just didn't like it, or I wasn't that good at playing it, the game. But I would always sit there behind my brother, and he would play it, and I'm like, oh, go check this thing, or let's do this thing. So we would, although he would be controlling it, we would kind of play the game together.
Right.
And I remember us trying to finish the game. I don't even think if we had the study guide then, but I remember there was like a keypad that she has to unlock.
Yeah.
But I think the storyline was so good too. Like, where I was, even though I'm not playing, but I'm still watching like almost like a movie, because they always had those cuts, right? The one where, you see her, she goes in this door, and all of a sudden it goes to like the angle, and it'll show her, going through like the mansion or whatever the case, where she was going through the courtyard, and then it would go into the player mode, and then that's when Manny would play again, and I would just watch it, and I'll be like, cool, but I wasn't playing, but I was still enjoying the time watching him beat it and giving my input, say, hey, you need to do this or try this. Yeah.
So I actually beat it only because I had cheat codes. I was stuck on a lot of things for a long time, but I remember it wasn't until like I had my hands on the cheat code for the rocket launcher with infinite ammo to finally beat the last guy. I forgot who it was, but yeah. So don't give me. I think you're giving me too much credit, but yeah, I did finish it.
I take no shame in cheats, honestly. I feel like I think at our age, with at least, the retro games, I kind of feel sort of entitled and a little entitled, and we feel kind of worth it because we spent
Yeah.
the grueling hours, the grueling years trying to get through these games. Where now it's like I'm 38 years old. Please, let's just get this done. I'm gonna die soon.
Right.
Just want to get this done, and so I think at this point in time, which is how we reviewed it on Retro Game Night, I was okay with that. I felt I don't care if we got backlash on it. I'm fine with it. I don't care. The point was to appreciate the game. It wasn't so much anymore about the challenge because we've been there. We've
Mhm.
experienced that as kids. We grew up with that challenge, and some of these were left undone or unfinished for us. Like we never finished the games, and like how does that one game end? Like what was the last boss? Um, and that's where I think cheats kind of helped us.
Yeah, that's a good point. To want to complete that game because hey, you think back and it's like which games did I not complete? Not because I mean because they were just so difficult, right? I can name so many, mostly from Nintendo. But
Yeah.
again, that was during a time before and Genesis before you had a save, you know.
Right, right. Um, the challenge I would say that came about during the PlayStation era was finding your save points because you could save, but you'd have to find your save points. It
You're
wasn't
right.
something that you could just nowadays. Again, another thing that makes it so easy. You're
Yeah.
playing Halo or Call of Duty or whatever. I'm throwing out FPSs, but
Sure.
you can feel free to pretty much turn it off at almost any point in time. And if you have to replay a certain part, oh boohoo, you have to play like 10 minutes, back. It's
Yeah.
not as grueling as it
Yeah.
was when you had to find your save point. Like you had to. So do you guys have a particular favorite console that you can think of? If you had to pick one out of your favorites, what would it be?
Manny, go first.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna default back to the PlayStation 1. It was ahead of its time, I felt.
I think mine would be the Sega Dreamcast because
Ooh, good one.
there's a big story behind it too. So I remember when we first got it, it had this big, bulky, remote control. The controller for that was, before the N64 remote, right? So it was this huge, like,
Yeah, it was bulky.
remote. But I think when we got it too, there was a time with, like, I believe it was the PlayStation or Nintendo 64 around that time frame. So we had a couple games, and I remember, and this is what happened. So we normally got a lot of the consoles. I think we had pretty much every console that came out after Nintendo. And what we would do with our consoles is, we have family in the Philippines, and we would give our consoles that we wouldn't play with to our cousins in the Philippines, where my grandparents would ship it in a box. They would say, okay, cool, here's, your gifts from your cousins, or things that they have that they no longer use. And I remember particularly with the Sega Dreamcast, I still liked it. Like I still wanted to play it. So that was me saying, okay, well, now we have to choose. Well, you have this system. Which one are you going to give? And I think it was just because we didn't have as many games as we already had with the other systems where we let that one go. And I think the game that really for that Dreamcast was Knights. Knights was when you could, it's this character and you would fly through. It's kind of like Sonic, but Sonic was only from left to right screen, right? So he was just going across. This Knights, you could fly, you could change your angles. It was almost 3D before. So you could fly through as a one person, as if you're going for it. And then you could also turn the screen and now you're going into like this route. But yeah,
Why do
it
I want
was
to say that that came out for Sega Saturn? Did it also come out for Dreamcast? Because I remember that was like their
yeah,
launch title, I want to say. Knights. And that was with the purple.
the purple. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a purple hair. I mean, I only seen it a few times, or a purple costume. I don't know. So I can't remember whether that
Something.
was something that was also for Dreamcast. But I do remember seeing that. That was pretty revolutionary too. All the flying and
Yeah.
the lights and
Motion.
everything was
Yeah.
pretty cool. Um,
I'll check on that. We'll edit this or check it out to see if it was actually
Yeah,
on the Dreamcast. Was it on the
I
Dreamcast?
yeah, I think it's Sega Saturn.
Oh,
Sega
Sega
Saturn,
Saturn.
right? Yeah, and I
Yeah,
can see how like you get mixed up because they were both very bulky controllers and like they were
Yeah.
both CD systems. So I remember both, yeah, the Saturn and the Dreamcast, and I do remember liking the Dreamcast. It was a little more obscure. It wasn't I don't think it was very successful, but I know that there was a lot of cult classics in that game
Yeah.
console. Personally, I would say anyone that's followed the show and has heard me before, I have a big fascination and love for the original NES, and that is just due to the fact of me growing up with it, and the games in particular that I had wrapped around my memory with. And then that would be my favorite cartridge game console. And then for CD, surprisingly, everyone gets surprised when I say this, but I really dug the GameCube when it came out. I was really, really big on the GameCube, and it was something that it just came out at a certain point in my life where it was the perfect change. It was different for me, so I dug that one.
The Super Smash Brothers.
So, yeah, Smash Brothers.
Super Smash Brothers.
There was that the original was for 64, but I want to say the GameCube one might have been Melee. I could be wrong, but I think that might be the one that was like
Melee.
the big tournament one where a lot of people were in tournaments over. That was the particular
Yeah.
one. I want to say it was that one.
Like a battle royale, and everyone's just different characters. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I dig it, man. I'm glad that I'm glad that we're back, Retro Game Night, in this episode. I'm excited to see where we could go and what we could talk about, and I think that there's a lot, obviously, to talk about still and relevant to today's gaming world. And I know a lot of people love to compare. They compare their new to the old and appreciation. I'd like to call this show all about appreciation for your roots if you're a gamer. So I give you guys a salute for that. I'm glad that you opened up. Manny and Earl, where can folks find you guys on social media? Earl, how about you first?
You could find me on Instagram, earl.lags, and that's my only social media platform at this time. Maybe another account to come. So I'll let you guys know.
There you go. Manny, how about you?
Yeah, so you guys can find me at High End Geek on Instagram as well as TikTok. So give me a follow.
Sweet.
Check out my
Awesome.
content.
Maybe we'll talk more about this stuff. You can find us, as always, collectively at retro_game night on Instagram. It's been a while since we posted on there. We will definitely be posting again. And then for me, you can find me at Damien_DeCarlo, as well as Making a Geek podcast on my other podcast that I do. So until then, everybody, keep calm and game on. See you next time. Good night, everybody.
See you guys.